During World War II, one weapon struck terror into the hearts of sailors everywhere: the German U-boat. These silent predators relentlessly hunted Allied shipping and came incredibly close to starving Great Britain into submission. But what was it like for the men sealed inside these iron coffins? The U-boat campaign was brutally effective. These submarines waged total war on Allied shipping, sending millions of tons of crucial supplies and thousands of people to the bottom of the ocean. For a time, they were the undisputed kings of the deep. However, as the war dragged on, the tide began to turn. The Allies improved their tactics and technology, and suddenly, the Hunter found itself in the crosshairs. What was that experience like, not for the U-boat as a machine, but for the men trapped inside? To understand that reality, we will follow the journey of one man, Hans Fischer. His story takes us past the steel hull and into the cramped, terrifying, and miserable reality of life inside a U-boat. Let's set the scene. In 1941, Hans Fischer was an apprentice mechanic. A teenager when the war began, by 1941 he had finished his training. Like millions of other young men across Europe, he was staring down a life-altering choice, one that was about to send him into the cold, dark depths of the Atlantic. Here was the choice he faced. He could wait to be drafted into the Wehrmacht, the German army, which almost certainly meant being shipped to the horrific Eastern Front, or he could volunteer for the Kriegsmarine, the Navy. For Hans, the thought of freezing to death in Russia was so terrifying that the unknown dangers of the sea seemed like the better option. He specifically volunteered for the submarine service. His reasoning was a mix of patriotism, a desire for elite status, and a dose of youthful optimism. Furthermore, with his background as a mechanic, he was a perfect candidate for the engine room. After 3 tough months of basic training, he was ready. Hans received his first assignment, the U-134. This was not a training sub. It was a frontline weapon of war that would become his home, his workplace, and very nearly his tomb. The U-134 was a Type 7C, the workhorse of the German submarine fleet. Over 500 were built. At 220 feet long, it was a formidable predator, armed with torpedoes and deck guns. But for the men inside, it was a cramped, smelly steel tube. 49 men, including Hans, were packed into that tiny space. 49 people, living, working, eating, and sleeping literally on top of each other, surrounded by loud machinery, deadly weapons, and the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. Once at sea, any romantic ideas about naval warfare vanished. Hans quickly realized that serving on a U-boat was quite possibly one of the most miserable ways to spend the war. The misery wasn't one single thing, it was everything at once. The claustrophobia was suffocating, there was zero privacy, men practiced hot bunking, sharing a single bunk in shifts. Every spare inch was crammed with supplies, not comforts. For Hans, it was a personal hell. As an engine mechanic, he was stuck in the hottest part of the boat. The 2 massive diesel engines threw off so much heat that the temperature was often over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, and all the while, he was breathing in a constant fog of diesel fumes. Hygiene was non-existent. There were no showers, as water was strictly rationed for drinking. The entire crew of 49 shared a single toilet. They were given chemical deodorant to try and mask the stench of sweat, oil, and grime, but it was a losing battle. That misery seeped into everything, even the food. Hans said that no matter what they ate, sausages, bread, canned goods, it was all tainted by the engine fumes. Imagine every single meal for weeks on end tasting like petroleum. But that constant grinding misery was about to be replaced by something far worse: pure, mortal terror. Suddenly, the routine of the hunt was shattered. An alert screamed through the boat. A lookout had spotted a destroyer on the horizon, heading right for them. The order rang out: crash dive! In an instant, the hunters had become the hunted, and their only chance of survival was to disappear beneath the waves. The procedure was a frantic race against time. The hatches slammed shut, sealing them in their metal tube. The ballast tanks flooded with seawater, pulling the U-boat down into the depths as fast as it could go. Then, the most critical step, the diesel engines were cut. They had to become completely silent, praying the sonar from the warship above would pass over them without detecting a sound. A new clock started ticking. Submerged and silent, they were trapped. The carbon dioxide from their own breath was slowly poisoning the air. While they had oxygen tanks and filters, there was a hard limit. After about 72 hours, the air would become unbreathable. It was a terrifying countdown. Either surface and face the enemy's guns or suffocate in the deep. Hans and the crew of U-134 survived that encounter. They waited in unbearable silence until the captain finally gave the all clear. But Hans's journey was far from over, and his survival placed him in a very small, lucky minority. The odds were staggering. 3/4, 75% of all German submariners were killed in action. Hans was one of the few, less than 10,000, who survived the war. He went on 3 more patrols, surviving close calls and relentless misery time and time again. After the war, he considered writing a book about everything he had seen, but ultimately decided against it. He simply did not want to relive the experience. That leaves a final question. Here was a man who survived, who witnessed one of the most unique and brutal experiences of the entire war. Why choose silence? Perhaps the answer is that some things are so terrible, so deeply awful, that survival doesn't mean telling the story. It means finally being able to forget it.